Hello, my gorgeous dance baby. Today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite subjects, learning how to learn. So, when you're thinking about learning dance, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to learn all these things. I got to learn the moves. I got to learn my facials. I got to learn all these, you know all the things because you're always, as a dancer, calculating all the things that you want to learn. Oh, that move was cool. Oh my gosh, how did I get down there like that? One of my favorite things to teach in the studio is learning how to learn dance. So there's like codes that we do in our heads just as natural humans. We make patterns out of things. We find similarities within things. And us as dancers, we decode and we want to make sure that we're able to just decode it in the way that suits ourselves. So when you know more about yourself, we always talk again about awareness. When you're aware of the way you learn, you're able to learn better, which means you're able to be a better dancer. So, one of those ways, and actually, let's first just talk about the 7 styles of learning. So, I'm sure you've heard about this. We've got the auditory learner, we've got the visual learner, the verbal learner, the social learner, the solitary learner, the logical learner, and then the kinesthetic learner. I mean, obviously, that's the most important one here in this case with dance because we're actively physically doing those things. Now, you might already know which kind of learning style you love. And that's awesome. Chances are that you're like a mix of 2 to 3 of those learning styles. So, back when I was an elementary school teacher, this was very helpful when we were creating IEPs for kids and when we were trying to figure out, okay, I want to deliver this message in a certain way. How do I do that? How do I make sure that this kid is going to receive my message? The same is true for adults and the same is true in a dance classroom. So I treat I treat my students the same way based off of figuring out, and that's actually one of my favorite things is to just figure out their learning style. And while I'm figuring it out, you might not even know that that's something that you can actually do and build all of your questions off of. So, for example, if you are and there's actually 2 of those styles that I don't really use at the studio. So, like solitary learning, like that's like private lessons. So, like right now, I'm talking about like the group format. But like with someone who likes to like just learn on their own, they might be doing like a on-demand dance program. So the other thing too is when we're thinking about kinesthetic, I mean that can be someone's learning style. And just because it's physical, it doesn't mean that when you're doing something physical, you're learning kinesthetically because you can learn something physical in a logical way. And when I'm teaching actually my couples how to dance, I notice that my male leads, they love logic. And when I'm making my similarities with dance, like things hit them way better when I'm talking about like graphs or, just like making things make sense through logic. And that's how things just like end up being memorized. So when we think about 2 things that are really important to learn about how you learn, 1 is memory, and 2 is musicality, and 3 is just your spatial. So when we're at the studio, one of the things that I'll tell my students to do is, hey, you got to find out where you like to stand in relationship to me. So I am standing obviously in the front. I face my mirrors. Sometimes I face them, but for the most part, I'm facing my mirrors. So they're behind me and they're looking at 2 options. They can either look at me, physical body me, or they can look at the mirror me. Okay, so the reflection of myself in the mirror. When you get into the space, there's something called feng shui. I'm sure you've heard of that as well. So there's already that in motion naturally, but then there's also the way that you track with your eyes and the way that you're going to be able to pick up steps so that they can get interpreted into your body. So I'll usually call my students either a right side learner, a left side learner, or a I need to be right behind you learner. And right now, if you're a dancer, you are already understanding like exactly what I mean. You're like, oh my gosh, that's why I'm always on the right side. And there might be a side that is just gravitating you all the time. Like you might just be like, I need to be on this side. It could literally be because it's closest to the exit, but I'm just kidding. But no, that's actually a real thing. So people who like are fight or flight, they tend to gravitate towards exits where they're sitting, like in a restaurant or at a table space, or if you were ever like in a large classroom in college, like if you notice that you sat more towards the entrance exit, like that's your fight or flight response working for you. So pay attention to that and see like how that suits you when you're going about your life in this next week. But anyway, so when we're on the right side or the left side, you're going to be like taking in the information in a certain specific way. So if you're on the side that's opposite of the way that you best learn, chances are that your memory is going to be affected. And then also the way that you are producing the movements. Because if you're seeing something from your left side angle, but your brain would rather see it from your right side angle, then the body could be completely in a different way. And actually, this was so funny. I was teaching this move and we like went up and we lifted our right arm up and then we put it back. And I was noticing that I think I had like 5 people on my left side and then 5 people on my right side. Everyone on my right side was getting the correct arm and they were doing it. But then everyone on my left side had the different arm. So that was just funny because they weren't beginner dancers, they were advanced dancers. So the fact that they all had kind of like a whoops moment about the same move is just like a really cool like thing to observe, especially because I'm always dissecting these things. Like, how can I always be like a better teacher for my students? So that's something that I'll say. And then for those of you that love to stand behind the instructor, that's usually because you like the physical body. So you're like needing to see what's directly in front of you. And that also means that when you're using your reflection, it's not as helpful to you as it is to just like look and like feel in your body, which means you might actually be better at memory and changing your spatial awareness, because when we dance in front of a mirror, we're learning how to give ourselves feedback a bunch of different ways. So 1, we're seeing what we're seeing. 2, we're putting in our body. 3, we're looking at the mirror to make sure the picture matches up with our body. So when we go about checking to see if we are correct, we're taking the alignment and we're like, okay, yep, that's how and we're really good at this. Like when you get to be a really good dancer, this skill is actually top notch. And you'll notice this with beginner dancers, like they're not doing that much of a copycat response because they haven't learned that skill yet. So when I'm watching my beginner dancers, I'm like, see if you can be the best detective and figure out exactly which parts of my body are on which spatial plane. That's a whole thing for another day. That's actually another one of my favorite topics because dancers love diagonals and dancers love angles. So when we're facing the mirror and then we're getting that feedback response of like, okay, yeah, that's correct, we are actually relying on the mirror to teach us that versus the way that the motion feels in our body. So for the people that learn directly behind me when they're not learning from the mirror, and the people that learn directly from behind me because they're looking directly at my body and not theirs, they're actually creating a better way of understanding their spatial awareness in terms of the relationship to the audience, which means they're going to be better at memory, especially when we switch directions, especially when you hop on stage and you don't have a mirror feedback. So something to think about too in terms of memory is all of the skills that are combined into that. So for example, I'm not sure if you've heard this before, but people memorize things in 7s. So if you have 7 things to remember, you'll remember those 7 things. And if you have more than 7 things to remember, the best way to remember those things is to group them within 7 different components or less. So when you're doing choreography, one tactic could be to teach 3 different phrases and have multiple different things grouped in 7 or below chunks so that you're attaching onto those. So that's more for me to know as the dance teacher. So if you're a dance teacher out there listening, like hopefully this is helpful for you when you're helping your students with memory. When you're a dance student and you're learning, it'll be like, oh my gosh, I have to learn that. I have to learn that, which is why at the studio, we love so much our get the fuck there moment, because the get the fuck there moment is picking out 7 things basically in a choreography and just knowing those. And if you know how to get there, you know an extra step. If you know how to get out of it, that's an extra step. So now instead of doing 7 things, you've just done 7 times 3. You've just done 21 things. So it's the before, the after, the actual get the fuck there moment. So that's 3 times 7, 21. So you can really play memory games on yourself when you group those moves or directions or transitions in different ways. So as you become a better dancer, that also means you're becoming better skilled at learning, better skilled at memorizing. And my last one that I'm going to talk about today is musicality. So the next thing that I tell my students is, okay, so you're right side learner, left side learner, or you're behind me. You're going to look at either body me or mirror me. And then the next one is, how are you going to listen to this music? Because don't forget, Dancers are the visual representation of music. So when we're able to do that, it's actually quite amazing because we're bringing to life the music and people are like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't hear that sound. That's so cool. I can't believe you brought that up." If there's like a deep beat and we just happen to click our legs, boom, it's like, "Oh, wow. That was that was cool." Like also maybe if they knew the beat was already coming and then we hit it so hard, they're like, "Oh, yes, thank you." It's like ASMR. It's like, "Oh, thank you for hitting that beat." So in dance, there's four main ways to listen to music. So we can listen to and attach ourselves to lyrics. We can listen and attach ourselves to beats. We can listen and attach ourselves to counts. And then we can listen and attach ourselves to being able to da da da, blah, blah, blah in our head. And that could be a mix of the three, or it could also be the actual steps that we're doing and saying those things while we're doing those things to the sound and the beat of the music. So when you're able to do and know that, you're a better dancer just because of that. So obviously, the best would be to be good at all four of those different things because then no matter what format the music is in, no matter which, if it's live music, if it's a song that's just like really hard, if it's a song that's, oh my gosh, in another language, sometimes those songs are so hard to attach because you're like, if you're a lyric person and you don't speak the language of the song, that's going to be significantly hard for you to do. So one of the best things is just to practice your versatility and be good at all of it. Uh, so let's talk a little bit about attaching yourselves to the music. So first, what you do is you just listen. So you just like hear what you're hearing. There's going to be something that comes out right at you. Maybe you know the song and you're like, okay, I know these lyrics. So for that song, you're going to be listening to the lyrics and you're going to be attaching your movements to the lyrics because it's easy. You know it. When it comes time to listen to the beats in the song, there's beats that everyone hears, and then there's sound effects or like woo or like like those sounds. Sometimes, yeah, I choreograph to those sounds. So I want to make sure that my students hear those because they could be very much on a count. But if the song is not like count worthy, then it's not going to be that easy for my students, especially the students that aren't counters. I think counting is a skill in itself. And I think when you're learning dance, you might step into a classroom and that teacher is only doing counts. And in a way, it's okay. It's great. Everyone's on the same page. They're doing counts. Beautiful. But in another way, like we're such an inclusive world. So why wouldn't we be inclusive of everyone's learning styles, especially if it's making them a better dancer in the beginning of their journey so that they can then be a better counter later on because it will make sense and it will snap in a different way. So I'm a firm believer in practicing learning all of the styles and understanding all of them. So if you catch yourself attaching to one, see if you can try the other one. So the musical beats, we talked about those. We talked about sound effects. Just spend time just listening to a song track, like with your eyes closed. See if you can visualize like what instruments are being played. See if you can just train your ear to hear those things. You'll be surprised sometimes, like you're like, what instrument is that? Like, I have no idea what that is. It's a little tricky now because we have like synthesizers and all these effects that are like an instrument, but changed because you can change the levels of everything now on like Ableton and everything. So then we have our counts. So obviously, if you're a count person, if you're new to dance completely, you might be like, counts. My teacher doesn't do counts. So what is this? But yeah, dancers count to 8. So when we're saying 5, 6, 7, 8, we're getting 5, 6, 7, 8 ready to go on 1. So if let's say the routine actually starts on 7, if you're not counting, you might not know like, oh, 7, unless you have a very clear auditory cue. Okay, so going back to learning styles, like now we're going into auditory, like we got to make sure we hear that. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do it. We're not going to be able to execute it that well. We might be off. Funny story, we were like working on this really funny trending thing. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's the Whitney Houston I Will Always Love You. And it's that like big beat and it's on the 1. But because there's so much silence, there's a whole 8 count or a 4 count, depending on what tempo you're counting in, of silence. And you have to maintain that beat. And it's just so tricky and so hard, but it's definitely doable, especially with practice and especially when you train your ear to count. And then there's just dancers that just feel. And like, if you're a feeler, you might just be like, yeah, I can just feel when the beat is going to happen and you know who you are. So we get a chance to count when songs just makes sense to count. So what I try to do is have my dancers count out loud. So if you've never done that before to a song, go ahead and throw a song on, see if you can feel where the one is, and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just feel. It's almost like when the sentence is changing. You might be able to pick it out when the paragraph is changing, so when the measures are changing, or even when different breakdowns of the song are happening. So a song that I love to use for this is Where Have You Been by Rihanna. It's just such a very vivid, it's so visually auditory, if that makes sense. It's literally like you can see how all the sentence structure, it's just so easy. So pop that song on and you'll know exactly what I mean. So just to wrap everything up, I could go into this for so long on each of these categories, but one, we want to become the best dance learners we can so that we can be the best dancer. We want to improve our skills in memorization and we want to improve our skills in musicality. And those 3 skills, so the skill of learning dance, the skill of learning how you memorize, and the skill of learning how you interpret music. How do you hear that music? Those 3 skills are going to help you be the best dancer ever. And that's what we want, because when you're the best dancer ever, you believe you're the best dancer ever, which means you're more confident, which means you're glowing, which means you're living a happier life and you're more authentic because of it. And because of that, you're attracting the best people around you. So I hope that you enjoyed this today. And don't forget, I will see you on the dance floor.